Hello, welcome to theCUBE episode 102. I'm John Furrier, Dave Vellante. Dave, salute from Hawaii. How are you?
Happy Memorial Day weekend, brother.
I got a little lag
USA,
here.
baby.
I got a little lag here in Hawaii. Bandwidth isn't strong, but that's okay. I'm glad to come in. I'm here at the ACTI Build Tides event, the micro community of athletes, conservatives, technologists, artists, and innovators. And I'm going to try kitesurfing for the first time. Get back out in there, get back exercising. But great event, hosting 3 panels: race for AI power, frontier AI builders, and Bitcoin native innovation. And a lot of mixture of experts here, very diverse. It's almost 50-50, male to female, group of excellent people, diverse perspectives. You study in the morning, you riff, and then you go kite surfing, and then you have a dinner and you talk about what you did. It's kind of fun. But it's high octane. And that is a word, high octane, that describes our past 2 weeks, past 2 months. I mean, Dell Tech World Day, we were at Dell Tech World in full force. That event was really kind of on fire. And ironically, Jensen Huang was in Taipei, Taiwan, for his event, which Jeff Clark was at, Computex. And that was an amazing event. We're going to dig into that Nvidia piece, but the Nvidia relationship and Nvidia and Broadcom, we'll get into that discussion. GoogleIO happened. Commerce Tools was going on. Microsoft Build. Just last week was stacked with a crypto event in New York. Everything is cranking. It's just like, we're back to events full force again.
Spain had an event in San Francisco.
It's just insane. Back to the pace of
there.
play. I'm going up to Amazon's headquarters, AWS, to film 10 executives. We're going to do like a halftime report. There's so much change in even Amazon that it's almost like a mini reInvent. I'm calling it a reInvent halftime report because it's really not officially. It's an unsanctioned conference. It's unreInvent. It's an unreInvent conference, Dave. So we're going to capture the stories. Uninvent. There's Amazon just announced again Anthropic, Claude, Sonnet 4, and you got Opus and Sonnet, just 2 excellent models on the benchmarks on agents. So Amazon is doubling down on agents. That's a great, interesting conversation. So I want to put a pin in that because you got some LLM data, okay? And I think the arms race is full boat right now, just full blown arms race for LLMs. Meanwhile, the infrastructure layer, massive change going on at the physical layer, all the way up through the shim layer between the data kind of mesh layer, harmonization layer, the semantic, whatever you call it. What do we call it? What do we call this? Because remember, we heard Dell talking data mesh. Data abstraction. What is it?
People call it the semantic layer, but sometimes that's confused with like even semantic search. And we've sort of been playing around with the data harmonization layer, but that's not really that's kind of geeky. But the whole point is you take structured data, unstructured data, different query types, different storage formats, and you're able to actually make sense out of it all. And it's not only that; it's the business context, and ultimately it's going to be the process context as well. So the business context will allow you to at least differentiate between revenue. Is it bookings? Is it revenue? Is it NRR? Is it ARR? Is it quarterly? Is it calendar year? Is it fiscal year? All that sort of nonsense. And then, not nonsense, but it's important. And then eventually process knowledge so that you can read form processes like Lego blocks instead of paving the cow path and saying, all right, we're going to just make this existing shitty process more intelligent. There's a better way to do it. Let's eliminate 10 steps. And
Jeff Clark had said that in his keynote: a shitty process is shitty AI. Something we're paraphrasing, but something to that effect. It's true, but the money's coming in, Dave. Look at that. Look at these deals this week. Okay, OpenAI acquired John.
I have his quote because I kind of bossed it on theCUBE. It says, so I wrote it, when I wrote it up, I actually got it right. Apply AI to a shitty process and you get a shitty answer faster. That was his quote. That was a great quote.
And this whole replacing job narrative is still out there, but the money is pouring in. Okay, OpenAI just acquired John Ive's IO products with $6.5 billion in all stock deal. Huge blow to Apple because Apple should have kept him on staff to kind of go after the AI intersection. Some say they're lagging on. Snowflake's got momentum in earnings. We saw their revenue beats. CoreWeave share soared. LM Arena got a seed round, okay, from Pete Sonsini and Andreessen Horowitz, Pete's new Loud Ventures. $100 million seed round, dude. A $600 million valuation to expand, of all things, the AI benchmarking platform. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Something we're working on. Yeah. Big data visualization company Domo smashing their targets. Builder had a lot of action. Data Hub got 35 million in funding for AI reliability and safety. Sweep raises a Series B of 22.5. AI tax startup raised 17.2 for tax returns. And the list goes on and on. Just more and more funding going on around the internet these days around AI. So, you know, Dell had their event. Red Hat had their event. We had cubes at both locations, as well as Commerce Tools. But you know, this AI Factory Day. I mean, Nvidia is at the center of it. I mean, Dell's announcements were essentially all in on Nvidia, and TensorWave, a company we've covered, raised $100 million to be the CoreWeave alternative for AMD. Now, no one's talking that up because some are saying AMD is not ready, but I like this TensorWave company because they have essentially a comparable in CoreWeave. So CoreWeave is already out there. They're already public, they're already massive, taking on a lot more debt, but clearly, you know, the fight for GPUs and energy and data centers continues. These GPU clusters are going to continue to thunder away and grow, and it's all powered by the speed of NVIDIA.
The narrative is that you don't need all these big GPU. Not everybody needs, you know, the latest and greatest GPU. You saw Steen we saw Steen at Dell Tech World. Our friend Steen, he stopped by, and you know, he was showing off a robot that was actually powered by CPUs. And so your point about, you know, the AMD cloud with TensorWave is it's you know, there's a need for that, especially for inference. I wanted to ask you, but the week kicked off with Jensen at Computex, and you know, Jensen's talks are always the best because he never, I mean, he does repeat some of the same things, but 90% of his content's new stuff that you really never have considered deeply before. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to Taiwan?
No, never.
I went to Taiwan only once. It was 1987. I was at IDC. We were on what used to be called the briefing session tour. It's now called Directions. So we used to go around, and maybe they still do some of this, but we used to go into every city where there was like IDC offices. So we did the Asian tour. It was Singapore, Taiwan, Korea, Hong Kong, obviously Japan, Australia, and at any rate, Thailand. So when you do these things, sometimes you do other people's talks. So I did the Taiwan trip, and I had to give Aaron Goldberg's PC talk. Now I was the enterprise guy. So we go to Taiwan, and it was at the time like a real kind of backwards country. The airport was a shithole. I remember going to the bar at the hotel. The hotel was like this crappy Hilton. And I ordered a beer, and the beer came in a bottle, and the label said beer, like literally. And then they gave me some nuts, and it was they just sort of threw it on the table. It was a package of nuts, and it said nuts. There was no branding whatsoever. And so I gave my speech the next morning. I had to give my enterprise talk and Aaron Goldberg's PC talk. It was the smallest audience I'd ever spoken to. And there were like 6 people in the audience. It was fine. But my point is, I'm watching the Jensen keynote, and I'm looking at Taiwan. Taiwan looks like Singapore now. I mean, it's so modern, so amazing what they've done with that country and Taipei, that city. And of course, they announced, you know, some amazing new, you know, Taiwan supercomputer and the new facility that Jensen's opening there. And I thought it was just a fantastic talk. I mean, he basically did rehash that, you know, AI factories are going to replace traditional computing, but then he announced NVLink fusion, I want to get your take on this, because he's basically enabling semi-custom AI supercomputers across the open ecosystem. And he made the point several times, look, I'd love if you buy everything from me, but you don't have to buy everything from me. At least buy one thing. And so you see Broadcom doing all this custom work for the likes of Google and others, and you know, ByteDance and Meta, et cetera. So now Jensen is allowing this sort of semi-custom capability through the ecosystem. So I thought that was interesting. Love to get your take on that. They sort of re-announced Rubin and gave a little bit more detail about, the HBM that's going to be in there. He talked about robots. He talked about his new Taiwan headquarters, a lot of digital twins. So I thought it was a really, compelling way to kick off the week. But what do you think about that sort of NVLink fusion and the ability to do semi-custom supercomputers across the ecosystem? Is that a shot at Broadcom?
Oh, absolutely. Switching is the hottest thing because that's all that you have to do between the networking, these GPUs and systems together. Networking is the operating system. We heard that at GTC. Jensen's keynote was significant because it really marks continuation of the leadership of the Taiwanese ecosystem of companies, and they've been in there 30-something years. We heard Jeff Clark saying he's been there over 35 years. It's the epicenter of the computer ecosystem, and it's a launch pad for new markets, especially in Asia. Outside of Jensen's normal historical arc of discussion, or hey, CUDA began 2006, blah blah blah, GeForce, they made all this happen. The NVLink fusion speaks to one of the key categories of the announcement, which is the AI infrastructure, which is the AI factory infrastructure. The GB 200, 300 systems were talked, 40 petaflops in single 120 kilowatt rack, has 72 Blackwell GPUs interconnected via NVLink spine. That's the big miles of cable. And then obviously the GB 300 upgrade is going to blow away some of the inference numbers. It's got more HBM. It's got 2 times more networking. Okay, but Broadcom's got Tomahawk coming out. Okay, so the NVLink fusion was key. Now the thing about NVLink fusion that got my attention was Nvidia is playing the buy everything from me. I call it the Apple strategy. Everything's Apple. NVLink fusion is an open ecosystem chiplet and switch IP that enables hyperscalers and CPU vendors like Dell and other ASIC players to build semi-custom scale-up AI infrastructures and systems. This is huge. The war in the infrastructure is scaling up. That's going to be the area to watch. Scale out's pretty much on a nice run. You're seeing a lot of the clusters scaling out nicely. The action will be in scale up, okay? And that's because the holy trinity of server, storage, and networking is in play. And I was talking with a founder here in Hawaii last night about the database, a fourth ingredient, the role of the database. The memory is involved. So you're going to start to see really interesting things go on. So I think NVLink fusion is a strategic announcement. Question is, what will that look like? Because remember, in scale-up networks, not to go in the weeds here, but when you have these scale-up racks, there's a notion of 2-tier and 3-tier hops, and the hopping between the scale-up clusters is more efficient if you have 2, not 3. So the smaller the number, the better. So that's going to be a very, very key thing. And I think we're going to hear from Broadcom in a month or so on the Tomahawk 6, which will have some features there. So it's going to be a war between NVIDIA and Broadcom. One's open, one's closed. So NVLink fusion, the way they're calling it an open ecosystem, will have to be inspected. Is it truly open? And what does it mean for the AI factories for NVIDIA? Does it make it just more interoperable? To our previous debate last pod about who cares if it's closed as long as it's a hard top. If it works, then and the databases aren't impacted, does it matter? Big discussion. This is going to come up to be a big discussion this year. The other areas Jensen talked about that built on the NVLink fusion that got my attention was the developer angle. The edge systems, DGX Spark, okay, 1 petaflops workstation. Okay, we had a workstation in our supercomputing booth, our set. We had a little, remember that demo we had from Carmelo? Essentially, it's a PC workstation, great for like vertical industries like healthcare and these life sciences where you need basically workstations. They also announced DGX Station, which is a desk-side AI supercomputer. That's to offload any kind of demand someone might have in, say, building models or training models. So maximum performance, plug it into a wall outlet. Don't run the microwave, though. Factor. And then finally, the enterprise AI platform, RTX Pro, Omniverse Server, the AI data platform they call IQ. So these are areas that are going to feed into robotics, AI operations, model management. So NVIDIA is very clear. Look, we're just going to disclose our roadmaps. they are not hiding away. They are not hiding the ball at all. So, look at what they're doing. They want full
Oh,
stack AI development from the physics layer, they call the Newton engine, all the way up to the digital twin apps. And that's their play. And they're not hiding it, anything, ecosystem, platform expansion, AI infrastructure. Those are the three areas.
so I want to come back to something you said. You mentioned chiplets. Now, you remember 2 years ago, we interviewed Charlie Kawwas for the first time on theCUBE at MWC 2023. And he talked about three things: open, scalable power, OSP. And he also talked about their chiplet architecture, which gave them greater flexibility. They use the term XPU, meaning you can interchange CPU, GPU, NPU, ASICs, accelerators, et cetera. And he stressed the flexibility of that. Now, historically, Nvidia has used a monolithic design, but they introduced, I believe, the first time Blackwell was this sort of, I'll call it a chiplet. It's still big chips, but they created very high-speed interconnect between two chiplets. And I think that's what they're referring to. And the challenge is, so the traditional design, as I understand it, is a big SRAM, and everything goes through that big SRAM. The importance of that is every component in that SoC can talk to the SRAM, and every component has synchronous access to that memory. And that's kind of how the architecture. The problem is, as you go to successive processes and you shrink down, from whatever, 7 to 5 to 2 nanometer, the SRAM doesn't scale down linearly. So it takes up a greater and greater portion of the real estate on the die. As a result, they had to go to this chiplet architecture, which, which means they have to have very high speed interconnects in order to not degrade performance. But at the same time, it gives them the benefit of being able to, what Charlie Kawwas was talking about, have the flexibility of bringing in different XPUs and accommodating, I think, which is what part of this announcement is, broader components of the ecosystem. And he stressed many times, Jensen did many times, I would love for you to buy everything, but just buy at least one thing from me. You can bring in other IP. So I thought that was an interesting emphasis of his talk.
Yeah, and I think Nvidia clearly is trying to play both sides of the market, the fully integrated Nvidia system end to end. They want to sell data centers as computers. That's their vision. And we've said that on theCUBE many times, we've been talking about it. But with the Amazon news, you got Anthropic, Claude, they're going after the agent market. So it'll be very interesting to see, does the line of homogeneous stop and heterogeneous kick in? And that's what I'm going to be watching in my coverage areas, and continue to unpack the impact of who's actually going to enable this data layer. So I think that's going to be the key to success, how the databases all function, whether it's OLTP to unstructured data lakes. Everything has to work together. And if you don't have the data, you're not going to have the AI. So that's going to be ultimately where the rubber meets the road, Dave, on agents. And agent building is going to get faster. I mean, GoogleIO essentially was looking at tons of AI around how fast can you replace the human, which had a little bit of blowback, by the way. I mean, there was some reporters kind of like, why all the emphasis on computers replacing humanity? That's essentially what the takeaway. Now, they didn't say that directly, but that's the reporters, other journalists and reporters were kind of walking away with that. But, I don't really buy that story. I think a lot of the automation is human grunt work, and, the efficiencies that are coming online are going to free up humanity. If anything, I think it's going to flip the other way. But you got to watch AWS, because they'll buy as much NVIDIA they can, but they'll integrate it into their cloud. They're not thinking, I'm just going to buy NVIDIA and replace all the work that they did with Nitro and the chips that they have. So I think we live in a diversity model of chips. I think we live in a world of diversity model for models. Computer vision and robotics are all foundational in the sense that it's multimodal. Video is going to be hot. So, you start to see the RAG market kind of mature in the sense of, retrieval augmentation generation is standard in the sense of search. It is awesome. I mean, the vector embed side of the market's going to grow like crazy. Confidential computing, encrypted end-to-end will be a thing. I think that's going to be something to watch. But all these things are enabled by how much infrastructure is under the covers. And you and I are students of history. We study the the wave we're in now, and we always compare it. At the end of the day, we compare it to the web a lot, but the other wave we compare it to is the PC revolution. 286, 386 processor, 486 Pentium. You saw that step function advances by Intel back in that era. And each time Windows got fatter and better and ran better, but then some say it got bloated. But the point is, the functionality got better, the evolution. So, I found it striking that Michael Dell and Jensen's conversation on stage was about the throwback to the PC revolution. That was their kind of the benchmark. They didn't really talk about the web. They both played in the web, but I think as infrastructure developers and engineers, they're like, this is more like the 90s and 80s. There's an incumbent platform, IT, and it's being replaced by agents, just like the PC revolution, and replaced mini computers and mainframe mostly. So I think we're seeing starting to see clarity around where the action is. And to me, it's infrastructure and still got more to do. So I think as that goes, you're going to see this. You always call it the horse race. I call it the NASCAR. So someone's got the lead, someone jumps in front. I looked at the benchmarks, and Amazon with Anthropic is winning on the agent side, but losing to OpenAI on others. So, horses for courses, your favorite line, right? Like, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're losing the adoption. Speaking of agents, and just to get off one more point about Jensen, you saw the VAST demo. They had a demo ready to go on Agentic, and VAST had an announcement this week. They're trying to be the AI operating system. They didn't get the memo that Nvidia is going to have the AI operating system, but regardless, it's good marketing. Yeah. And but the point is that Jensen spent 2 or 3 minutes just showing the VAST demo, which was, and then they said, and by the way, Dell, NetApp, and IBM and some others have this sort of data platform as well, but VAST got the bulk of the love. Jeff Clark got a lot of love too, but that must have pissed some people off. Like,
yeah. Look at VAST. VAST is marketing right now. Okay, they're a data platform, but they're really storage. So what's interesting about the Dell Technologies World Conference, you notice they announced the data platform. So EMC, Dave. Yeah. Dell has EMC. So the question is, VAST is out marketing Dell. Period. No doubt about it. And so they have to get their act together. And from what I saw at Dell Technologies World, they changed their product names, the Power family. Power Scale, Power Storage, Power Protect. I mean, they simplified that. They're kind of doing what Steve Jobs did with Apple when he cleaned up the portfolio. So that's good. But the action at Dell is the data layer, this disaggregated architecture. They are going to fight tooth and nail against VAST, because VAST thinks they can run the table, and they are doing well with the hyperscalers and the big customers, but they have to win the enterprise. Okay, that's an EMC turf. And I'd be hard pressed to think that's going to be uncontested by Dell. There's no way that Dell lets that happen in an easy way. So it'd be very interesting to see how VAST and others emerge in. VAST is going to try to throw their muscle around as the leader, and I like the marketing of the operating system. But remember, they had an announcement earlier, and they're shared everything, whatever. So they had something going on. I forget what it was, but it was kind of very Barney-like. So.
They're knocking down some OEMs, and Dell, they're partnering with Dell, they're partnering with HPE, they're partnering with Lenovo, they're partnering with Supermicro, so they're obviously doing something right.
They have a good product.
I wrote the VAST, I said VAST Data is attempting one of the most audacious pivots we have seen from an infrastructure vendor in the last decade. So they're now $2 billion in software revenue in under 6 years, which is, they claim faster than any data infrastructure company on record, I guess, including Snowflake and Databricks, but they haven't achieved it. They're trying to pivot to a data platform company. They really have not achieved a Databricks style, or Lakehouse or Snowflake grade cloud database, or even a kind of hyperscaler data platform. The database is really an index. Rob Strechay goes deep into that. It doesn't have ANSI SQL engine and mature governance and things of that nature, but they very clearly are winning in the AI game, and they're knocking down the neo clouds like CoreWeave, like Lambda. And as we know from our activity in the NYSE and all the banks that we've been talking to, they're all building their internal AI stacks for on-prem and they're all testing VAST. They're bringing VAST in. Is this a DDN is there, Weka is there, a little bit of hammer space as well. But VAST is, I would say, by far the most talked about platform, storage, data, whatever you want to call it, AI data platform for those big banks. And that is interesting. And to your point, Dell is not going to sit back without a fight in the enterprise. They have earned the badge, at the loading dock. I think the challenge for Dell, of course, is to sell beyond its IT peeps, right? You're not selling this to the IT department. You're selling this to the head of AI, the chief AI, architect, the lines of business. But Dell has earned the right to go talk to those people.
Yeah, I mean, look at what VAST did was smart. They were a storage company that created the data platform category. Okay, they launched Studio, and then they're off to the races in our Studio. Remember that a couple of years ago, and everyone's following suit because why? It's an easier message. The thing that I'm watching, though, this is a wild card. Again, I love the revenue, love the success of the product. I'll talk to Brennan about this in great detail. Is that the infrastructure changes, the storage fabric layer is real, right? So the question is, can Nvidia's of the world, who are going to move very, very fast, and as storage, the priority and role of storage changes, and again, we heard a lot about this with Dell, they're seeing it, that who's going to be that storage layer around the HBM? Because what's happening with the clusters with KV Cache and Dynamo and NVLink Fusion, all these things that are coming out that are kind of stitching things together and oversimplifying it, but to the point of discussion, the storage has to get closer in latency because the enterprise has a lot of data that's not public. That'll be on-prem. So can they get there? Can their products support that notion?
So what I love about what they've done, and we learned this from our SuperCloud sit-downs with Renan and Jeff Denworth. I got to tell you, I've known Jeff Denworth for, gosh, almost 2 decades now, and I'm so impressed with not only his marketing savvy, but his technical knowledge. I mean, he's the guy they trot out to go deep tech. At any rate, they had a slide, which I really liked, which was kind of their concentric circles and their evolution. They started with the data store, which was this scalable object parallel sort of file system. And that's kind of what they were known for. And then they, a couple of years ago, you remember you were talking to Jeff Denworth at the Databricks conference, and they talked about their database. They sort of teased it, which is this real-time kind of metadata and vector indexing capability. And that's both of those are now shipping, and they've introduced a data engine, which is like, remember, everything's got to be inside of VAST, but it's containers, it's function runtime, it triggers Kafka like streams, and that's coming this year. I'm not sure if it's first half or second half. I mean, the first half's almost over. And then they introduced this thing called Insight Engine, which is embedding microservices for that whole semantic context enrichment. That's the second half of this year. And then this thing called Agent Engine, which is this low code or even no code framework for building and orchestrating agents. So they're playing in that game, and everything's exposed through a unified namespace. So it's all inside of the VAST. It's kind of Snowflake-like in that sense. It's got to be inside of VAST to get all this benefit. But they're moving fast, rhymes with vast, and you got to be impressed with what they've done and the valuation
astronauts
they're getting.
Yeah, Jeff's smart. He's working. They've worked so hard over the past 2 years. I remember you mentioned the teaser we did with Jeff Densworth. That was at Databricks 2 years ago.
Right.
Okay, so in 2 years, they got $2 billion in run rate. They're targeting the enterprise aggressively. They kind of ran the table on the hyperscalers. I mean, they were the only game in town for a specific use case, which was I'm training a lot of data. Now we're in the inference world. You got reinforced learning. That was what jumped out of Jensen's speech. We were talking about reinforced learning for years on theCUBE, but after inference, sucks all the oxygen out of the room. Reinforced learning is going to be the number one thing we're going to talk about. What are these models going to do on an iterative basis? Are the models connecting? Are the models fusing together? Are the models talking to each other? Are they trusted? What's the data supply chain behind them? What is the security posture? These are hard questions, and enterprises are not going to just let generative AI walk in unless the process end-to-end, the workflows are nailed down. But to me, this sounds easy on paper on the enterprise AI, but it is not. It's going to be hard as hell. And we'll see. I mean, it's going to come down to, is it a replacement strategy? Do I have to get rid of Dell to bring in my stuff, or do I have to run on Dell? And I think, the ecosystem that's developing out of open source is going to be massive. And I think you're going to see potentially a scenario where startups and really new brands that come out of the woodwork, because we're in the shift where new brands will emerge, new brands that are going to do things differently. We called it in theCUBE modern legacy. I was talking last night that Redis is modern legacy on a podcast. Redis modern legacy.
Redis is actually, I tell you, it's looking good in the spending data. But just one last point on VAST, because I wanted to stress, because they participated in SuperCloud. They actually have a SuperCloud because it's a unified namespace. They can run in the cloud, they can run on-prem, they can run in Neo clouds, they can run at the edge. And so, is it an operating system? Well, they're leveraging data gravity for the reasons that in the strategy that I just talked about. They've got agent native primitives. They've got single tier flash. So that's kind of cool. And they're managing that. So those are all sort of supporting the claim. It's not really an analytic database, truly. It's more of a distributed index. The ecosystem of Databricks and Snowflake and AWS and Google, those are going to be hard to unseat. And, in the complexity of merging storage and database and stream processing and container scheduling and all that stuff that an operating system does is non-trivial, but they've got a good engineering team. So I love the marketing of the AI operating system. When Jensen's up there talking about Dynamo as the AI operating system, and you got to admit, that's pretty ballsy.
Yeah, it's a really good marketing. We should call theCUBE the media operating system, running on Nvidia. It's not. Stock will go up. Valuation will triple. We'll do $100 million seed round. I was watching some news. I got to share this with you. So ChatGPT, is driving traffic to over 250 news sites. We're one of them. Okay. Last year.
Websites? Say it again. I couldn't hear you cut out.
I think 200. I'll get the exact number. I think 250 news sites plus in April. They sent 243 million visits. And up 98% in January. So in January, they delivered 123 million visits to sites, news sites in January. In April, over 243 million. So you're starting to see the traffic surge with publishers, because now that speaks to the search angle that ChatGPT is going to kind of come after Google, and GoogleIO is not going to sit around. Google Search is not going to sit around. A lot of sites lost traffic. So what's happening is that the AI. I talked with Lucy, who runs earned media at Dell, about this, and you're already seeing AI doing the work and vetting the content. You're already starting to see tell signs where that's happening. For example, there's also a news report that these sites, Anthropic, for instance, the chief product officer said that 70% of Anthropic's code pull requests are now written by their model. He also says is that they're now vetting that they can tell if someone's marketing fake drugs. I also talked to Lucy about this too, that in the analyst world, the AI is going to start realizing who's fake and who's real. And you're already starting to see it now with drug companies, where the engines are actually looking at the data saying, that's not a true claim. I talked to Sam Grocott about this. As people start buying, you're going to start seeing AI engines match the conjecture of claims made by vendors. This is this is brand new. This is something that we talk about in theCUBE kind of out, and abstract, but it's actually happening. Data now coming to the table to prove what we've been saying for a year, that AI will start matching conversations and see who's essentially speaking vendor speak, or who's independent. What's true? Does this work on this system? If someone makes a claim, our stuff works on this way. No, it doesn't, because now you have other data coming in from other sources. So you're starting to see a data aggregation layer building very quickly in this AI world around media. And that's going to be a huge factor. And again, we've been saying it in the abstract because we've been seeing some of the trends, but that's a huge game change, Dave. I mean, Anthropic's basically saying if you're marketing something, they will block your traffic.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see, because people will try to game that system. They'll try to game it with, did you see Vast announced shared? It's called Shared Everything. It's a media platform, and they hired some gal out of the register to run it. And I was like, yeah, you're not the first to try that. I mean, Microsoft does it. Actually, Microsoft.
They're going direct. It's a good move by VAST. Why wouldn't you? Well, no one goes to websites anymore.
But my
it's still
point
owned
being,
media.
But my point being, it's got to be like Salesforce does a really good job. Microsoft does a good job. Others, I won't even call them out, don't do such a good job. Oracle tried this with Bob Evans. He was actually pretty good, but they killed it because they're Oracle's. But at any rate, at the end of the day, I'm sorry, these are not independent media companies, because independent media companies don't shit on them, or vendor media companies don't shit on themselves. They don't they hide the truth. They tell some of the truth.
It's called lies. It's called spin, Dave. Spin's code word for lies.
Exactly. They spin. And so
spin the
that's
story.
Fine that they do that and they focus on thought leadership, but it's not independent media. It's not a competitor to what we are doing. Yeah. So, don't fool yourself. My point, though, being to your earlier narrative there is what vendors will try to do is they'll try to veil independent content and flood the zone with their messaging. And so it's going to be interesting to see if Anthropic and other LLMs can actually filter that out. So, because we'll be flooding the zone with the truth.
Yeah, the truth. I mean, the truth doesn't lie. At the end of the day, it comes down to the data access. So if a analyst, for instance, says, a company XYZ has a tailwind and they go bankrupt the next day, then they're frauds, right? So this is kind of where it goes. And trust and authenticity matter. But the point is that at the scale, no one's going to a website. Users are using tools like Perplexity, like ChatGPT, like Anthropic to find out what they're looking for. And I remember I was talking at dinner last night. A guy named Ben, he was an early Microsoft guy, and we were talking about the old days. And I remember when we were doing the Google search implementations, when we ran their paid keywords at real names, and everyone clicked on the first link at the top of the page. And at that time, this is like 1999, 2000, 2001, Google was the #1 algorithmic search. And then they were hardcore. Larry and Sergey were hardcore about organic search results. They were like tirelessly like, screw ads. We hate ads. That's bad user experience. But we actually showed them data that said people are generally lazy. So the top link always gets clicked, the first one they see. And then we saw a usage pattern that was people actually clicking on the ads to the right, which was AdSense, if you know your history. So AdWords was on top and AdSense was on the right. AdWords.
Love that. I used to love that. You're right. It was value add when you were looking for
some people wanted to find a plumber. And some people wanted to find information about Dell. And that new usage pattern made billions and billions of dollars. Now, if you remember, one of the core themes in my post going into Dell Tech World about AI was that model efficiency and new usage patterns will emerge, and they are. My point is, and to go full circle to what we were just talking about, is that the new pattern is people actually want to find Dell. So Dell and the people who want to sell products, they have to do a good job of optimizing for the truth. So the vast, hey, look at me, I'm trying to be a media company. That ain't going to go, right? That's going to be fake. What they should do is thought leadership and amplify, their own media for their own products so that they can have a truthful result, so that when we do content, which people consume because we're independent, they can see a vast comment or piece of media maybe next to it. So the Google model of search is now going to be kind of disaggregated, if you will, and applied to AI, meaning people at the end of the day are trying to discover and find what they're looking for. That was Google's original model, helping people find what they're looking for, right? So that's a simple value proposition. How do you apply that to AI? How fast can I get something? Is it accurate? Does it get me to a progression of action? Period. So, that's shopping. That's browsing. Or do I launch an AI factory? So, Dell's smart. They recognize this. And so this is my point. The old model is dying. The old model of look at me on media, run an ad, maybe I'll click on it, go to a lead gen page. It's over. That game is over. That ship has sailed. So, as far as I'm concerned, we've been seeing it for 15 years. Network effect, trust networks. It's all the progression of who do I trust? Because now it's a sea of noise. Where's the signal? And extracting that signal from the noise, that's been our mission from day one. Money, making money off ads, we could have done that. So again, companies like VAST, I think it's a good call that they're moving in that direction because it takes them off the website. I mean, are websites even relevant? It's a system of record as far as I'm concerned. You post your content there and you merchandise it into the engine. So you got to push the content out into the channels. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's
Did you
clearly
see what Microsoft announced? They
what, the
basically
co-pilot.
basically AI for websites. It'll sort of summarize any website.
I mean, sales and marketing is the number one use case. Why? Because it's efficiency. Okay, the models are getting efficient. They're getting more targeted, and the new usage is automate the grunt work that takes the time from someone saying, I got a sales call, whatever they do, to having a good proposal to align with the customer, to sell them something, right? So, the agents are going to absolutely fill this void. There's no doubt in my mind. The question is, how do you architect the data?
Yeah, so
period.
Microsoft announced MCP and NL Web. They did an integration. So NL Web is the way to sort of agentify any website. And they're leveraging MCP, which MCP seems to be really taking off as the key standard. Of course, I forget what Google's version of MCP is called. Microsoft's not going to use that. So it's probably going to be a security nightmare. And talking to people like, Jackie McGuire, leads our security practice. She's like, oh, this is MCP and agents are going to be a security horror show. But to your point, do you even need websites anymore? Because agents are going to go out and figure out what you need. And that's going to be the new abstraction layer. You're not going to have to go to websites.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a great time to be in the business. There's also a conversation this week around Sergey Brin back at Google. We know he's been back for some time, but he basically walked on stage on a panel. There was to be a one-on-one with the head of DeepMind, and Sergey shows up. The moderator like, I guess we're doing 2 interviews, and he said for our computer scientists, there's never been a greater problem or opportunity to solve, and it's the best time to be in the business. And if you think about computer scientists, folks my age, I was doing AI in college, but it was pretty much theory. There wasn't a lot of infrastructure to act on. So you're seeing 2 sets of people coming into the AI computer scientist role: young guns and old bogeys like us, who have experience. There's no ageism in computer science, okay? Especially in AI, because a lot of the AI stuff is systems thinking. That's stuff from folks who worked in college in the 80s like me, who grinded through proprietary to open source, and then young kids coming in with all this tooling. And essentially, it's like Lego blocks. I mean, if you're a kid, if you're in your 20s right now, this is a dream scenario, because it's like playing Pokemon these days. All the actions, code assistance, code generation, that's going to move quickly to agent infrastructure. And that is why Jensen's on this agents of the IT department for software, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to see a plethora of agents, and that's just composing the action. So physical, chips, data, clearly more work to do. And then finally, I'm giving a talk today. I'm moderating a panel with Bill Tai here at ACTI Global in Maui for this retreat, where we're going to talk about energy. Obviously, there's a lot of crypto folks here as well. So you have a lot, the convergence of alpha blockchain developers and entrepreneurs. They're solving the same problem, Dave: energy. Okay, because tokens on Blackwell's coming out of the factory, data in, tokens out. That's the AI factory. Well, you got token economics also on the blockchain. So those worlds are converging very fast. Crypto infrastructure, decentralized infrastructure, is converging like at a breakneck speed, and with breakneck speed comes breakthrough. So I think it's the best opportunity to be in the business if you're a techie that I've ever seen before.
Totally agree.
In any way. Anyway,
this is a blast, and it's like I can't wait to see where it goes. And then just coming back to Dell Tech World for a second, I thought it was good. I mean, from PCs, AI PCs, all the way up. I mean, the gap in the market that Dell is trying to fill, they've got kind of this dual mandate where they've got to, win the day in AI, enterprise or enterprise AI, and they have to transition their install base to this new architecture. Jeff Clark said something in our private meeting. He goes, look, this is an entirely new architecture, and most enterprises aren't ready for it. Many don't even understand it. And obviously, the big banks do. But when you get below the top 500 companies out there that don't have the resources, they've got all this stuff. They're not re-architecting their entire business around AI and parallel computing. And so Dell has to lead in that. How do they lead in that? Well, their first chapter and second chapter and third chapter was all based on Intel. Their fourth chapter is going to be based on Nvidia. So they're all in on Nvidia. And so that's why you see Michael Dell and Jensen, basically belling it up. I mean, everybody wants to do that. Antonio wants to do it. The vast guys, everybody wants to be Nvidia's best friend, Jensen's best friend. But the gap that they're trying to fill is that people are doing AI in the cloud. We know this. I've got data on it. I'm happy to share it with the audience. But enterprise AI, i.e. on-prem AI, is, Jensen talks about that as the second wave after the hyperscale AI. It's not happening in a big way yet. Dell brought out.
They're bellying up to the bar. I like that term, bellying up to the bar, because they are hyperscalers. Clearly, the first market. It's 5 customers. We all know who they are. So, Google, Meta, Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon, and maybe a little Oracle.
So the challenge is
X in there.
Those enterprises, they don't have the skill sets, most of them, and they don't have solutions coming out of the vendors. The vendors are, like HP and Dell, largely doing hardware and is putting the Nvidia stack on top. Of course, Nvidia wants everybody to buy the whole stack, but customers, they don't want to buy the whole stack. They've got other stuff. They've got governance platforms. They've got data platforms. They've got tooling to use that they've standardized on. It's all about standardizing for them so they can scale. So that's why, the announcement at Computex is so important of, NVLink Fusion, because you can bring in other capabilities, other tooling, other parts of the ecosystem. Two announcements stand out at Dell Tech World in support of this solution. One was Cohere and the other was Glean. I think Glean is very, as we know, immature. You've had Arvind on a number of times, and they had no on-prem AI. I still don't think it's baked, but they're at least announcing things with Dell, and their intent is to put AI on-prem. It's probably going to take some time to develop a solution. And Cohere, I first met the guys at Cohere last year at Dell Tech Summit. We had a great conversation late night, me, Rob, and this guy from Cohere, Kon was his last name, former CFO of YouTube. Awesome, brilliant guy. Basically explaining, we're not chasing AGI. We're not trying to compete with OpenAI and Anthropic. We and Grok and Llama. We are all about on-prem AI and proprietary models, proprietary data. Now they're working with Oracle and OCI, Cohere that is. This is the first example of on-prem, Cohere on-prem, building agentic models for proprietary data. The whole point about Jamie Dimon is Sam Altman's biggest competitor, that piece that George and I wrote, leveraging those data sets. And so this is, to me, there's a 12 to 18 month window for Dell, HPE, Lenovo, Supermicro, et cetera, to build out those solution stacks and help enterprises adopt on-prem AI. Top banks, they probably don't need as much help. But
Larry Fine, you're exactly right. Totally right. By the way, Aiden at Cohere, I interviewed him 2 years ago. So when they were just getting started, it was a great company. The enterprise angle, though, is right on. At Dell Tech World, Larry Feinsmith from JP Morgan Chase, he's head of global strategy. They have a 30-year partnership with Dell. They're doing 10 trillion payments a day. They have over a $13 billion technology budget, according to Lori Beer. I thought it was 10, now 13 billion, according to Larry. But these are practitioners that are getting the work done. So, I would like to shout out to all the practitioners in the enterprise out there who are doing the work, because you're right. Jeff Clark is right. There's a new architecture. JP Morgan Chase is kind of a bellwether because they're kind of a unicorn. They stand out because they're just so advanced. They're almost, to me, almost like a hyperscaler the way they act. They're just so massive. They got 6,000 applications, over exabyte of data. I think it's 2. And they have 20,000 software developers, 45,000 technologists. That's a massive army of people. Their priority is to put AI into everything that they do. But they are hardcore on cybersecurity. They have a huge, high resilience bar. They want a modern, resilient infrastructure that scales. They will not let anything in there. And that's the top company, okay? If you look at the data value on-prem that they have, you mentioned the Sam Altman competitor. What your point there is that they're as big as OpenAI. OpenAI is throwing up hundreds of millions of users in an audience, right? So the LLM strategy for them was very clear. what Larry pointed out is their strategy is to look at LLMs as a constellation of models in the cloud, on-prem, and the edge. Large-scale inferences, they see driving more compute, they're validating the infrastructure trends, and their focus is get that infrastructure up and running and then solve the low-hanging fruit for the future of the enterprise workforce. They went into great detail on how they're changing the next-gen modern workspace. That's why we heard from Dell and Glean's popular, because search is one of those use cases that users need. How do I get something fast to go on a sales call, service a customer, whatever they got to do? You cannot do that without an AI strategy or data strategy. And agents do not work if they suck, to Jeff's point. So data is the long pole in the tent. That's where the value will be extracted. And the use cases are being seen. I mean, Larry said they're rolling out LLM suite to 200 people at JP Morgan Chase on their own data. They're actually rolling out an LLM suite. So, he had a term called, I don't know if you caught this, Dave, application solved the swivel chair problem. Did you hear what he said about the swivel chair problem? You have two screens, you're swiveling your chair, you're context switching. He sees that as a real ROI use case.
Like a security analyst.
Yeah. Code. So that's the productivity, solve the swivel chair problem, which is context switching and getting stuff fast, which is search and other data retrieval like value. And then the second area that they see immediate value today is code generation. That's where the action is. That's where agents will, I think, go right out of the gate to. I'm giving a talk here at ACTI on agent building. That's going to be really the theme of that talk, which is, the swivel chair and code generation. And do you have the compute envelope? Do you have the number of tokens? And token demand is going to continue to thunder away. I mean, reasoning, we see the data drives more tokens needs. So, multi-step reasoning versus one-shot answers is proof. More tokens are needed. And the price per token nonsense, that's just on benchmarking on speed. There's nothing to do with economics. So that's something that else came out of Dell, is that people tend to think about, are you pricing tokens? Do you get a charge per token? Like, what are you talking about? Charge per token? No, it's more tokens.
Yeah, more tokens. Charge per tokens. The customer's going to go broke.
Well, I mean, the price per token, this is the thing, if folks listening, you hear price per token, that's a benchmark to show the effectiveness of the model efficiency on the hardware. So the throughput of first token out and how many tokens can be generated, that's a speed. NVIDIA uses that benchmark, has nothing to do with pricing value. I think it's an all-you-can-eat token model because that's what the market needs. It's an all-you-can-eat token buffet. Take your tokens, and more tokens, the better, the more customers they'll get. So I think that you won't see pricing on tokens. You'll see pricing as a benchmark for throughput on vendor selection, or like, do I buy an Nvidia or do I buy an ARM? And look at DeepSeek. DeepSeek was algorithmic. That's another thing Sergey Brin said on his speech at Google this week. Software will make efficiencies too. And it's not about Nvidia. Now, of course, they have a competing solution. Take it for a grain of salt. Anyway, I wanted to bring up the JP Morgan Chase because we are talking to a lot of practitioners running the teams that are resetting their entire infrastructure. And the theme's very clear. I don't know what I don't know yet, but I do know this. I need more tokens. I need to serve the demand of tokens because there's a tsunami of agents coming. They'll hit sales and marketing, swivel chair use cases, and they're going to hit code generation out of the gate. That's it. That's the beachhead. To use my Hawaii metaphor here, because I'm in Hawaii. But I mean, everything else is just hand waving. I mean, that's what I would say.
So I have some data I want to share with you, back to LLMs if I can. So this is from ETR, from this week's breaking analysis that I'll publish tomorrow. It's what best describes your company's plans with the following language and foundation model families specifically for AI application development. And it goes through, we get no plans to evaluate, we evaluated what we're not using, we plan to evaluate or adopt, we're currently using and plan to continue to use, we're currently using but we're going to replace it, or I don't know. OpenAI, like GPT, is like by far, it's like almost 80% of the respondents, almost 500 respondents, almost 80% are either using and continue to plan to use or or plan to use ChatGPT. The next closest is Gemini, and it's about, that's actually pretty good. It's about 50%. Much less existing usage, but much higher plan to use. So Gemini is right there. Anthropic is about 40%. So just behind. Metalama about just under 40%, mid 30s, like 37%. Microsoft Phi, interesting, like 38, 39%. Databricks, DBRX, 25%. Amazon Nova / Titan, 31%. Snowflake Arctic hits the leaderboard, 26%. And then Mistral, 18%. DeepSeek, only 5%, actively using it today, but 21% plan to evaluate and or adopt. So that's 26% to apples. I was really surprised Grok was much lower. So XAI, kind of doesn't even show up here. Maybe 16% plan to evaluate it. IBM Granite got a mention, several mentions. Less, but then 7%. Cohere, much more narrow, 5%, 5 to 7%. And then, way down, you got AI 21 Labs. So that was kind of interesting. But the reason I bring this up is twofold. One is OpenAI, Microsoft continue to dominate. Google's right there. But we had a debate back in January 2023, you, me, and Sarbjeet on a breaking analysis. And the premise was that OpenAI will not be able to maintain its first mover advantage. That was Sarbjeet and I, my premise. Your counter to that was, yes, they will, as long as they keep innovating. It's very clear that OpenAI is at least to me anyway, I feel very strongly, they are the innovation leader when it comes to LLMs. And so to your point, if they continue to innovate, somebody could have, breakout velocity and maintain that. The move that they made with Johnny Ives is really so interesting. And because they are trying to change the game on devices where this is not the way we're going to interact with our devices in the future. So, the jury's still out, John, but I like your countervailing premise.
I might be right on this one again. Well, no, I mean, it's not about being right. It's about us. When we published over 3 years ago, the power law, we said the premise was, and this is where the foundation of the debate was, and there was semantics. You can argue how we laid it out, but I think we nailed the specialty models. Maybe some of the language could, was pretty much right, small language. We nailed that. So that power law, if you don't know what the power law is, search power law, SiliconANGLE theCUBE. We said at the power law, at the top of the head of the curve, it would go straight down, and then the belly would increase. There'd be a neck and a belly for the power law. We said that the proprietary, at that time, they were called proprietary models, which Elon Musk would claim that OpenAI, the name he takes credit for, was open. They weren't. They were quite closed. We said that those models, like OpenAI, would stay at the top of the head, and new ones would develop, and that's exactly what happened. And this next month, there's going to be a bunch of events. You got Snowflake, you got Databricks event. Those events will be a tell sign. I guarantee you're going to see an integration of the models. You're going to see model marketplaces. You're going to see app store-like capabilities where models will be in app stores. You'll start to see vertical models emerge, and these vertical models have to talk to each other. And that's why the connective tissue of agents and this data layer will have an abstraction that will be intelligent. We'll have information about agents, agents for agents. There'll be graphs for graphs. There'll be databases for databases, compilers for compilers. There'll be AI for AI. Everything's going to happen that way. So you're going to start to see more intelligent in the systems. That is absolutely why I think OpenAI will continue to lead. If they could feed the power law, they'll keep that lead. Will they be runaway train? No, not at all. It'll be a power law. But the neck and the torso will blow up on the curve. When it first started, it was the top foundation model, straight down, knife edge, long tail. That was the power law. And study power laws if you're interested in AI, because this is going to be a topic that will be probably the mental model and the reference to where things fit. It's not a bad thing to be in the long tail. You can be a very small healthcare model and dominate. You can be a very small transactional model and work there. Either way, the infrastructure has to support all these transactions. And again, I had a podcast last night talking about OLTP moving out of financial into agents, and IBM Z's mainframe, which dominates the financial market, is going to actually move into other transactions because the velocity and latency of small transactions at volume is a transactional OLTP system. So look for shifts in the database market. So again, database market, add that to our holy trinity of storage, compute, networking. That's the area to watch. So if you want to squint through and connect the dots, we're putting the puzzle together in the CUBE research. You can always come to us. We have detailed on this, but if you're listening, you want to see where the action is, you go there. You go to the database, you go to the infrastructure. Those are the bricks and all the mortar that connects the bricks that you like building a brick wall. You put all that mortar down. That's the software. We'll see. We don't know. So, well, Dave, I'm in Hawaii, so I'm going to jump on a few waves since I'm here.
That's awesome. Good luck with that. That sounds like a really challenging. I mean, I know Brian, our friend Brian Bauman.
Brian Bauman's here with me, founder of NYSE Wired. Basically, almost half the group here is NYSE Wired trust network members. So the CUBE and NYSE Wired continuing to bring together a series of micro communities, and that's what's happening. If you look at what's going on with the NYSE Wired, it's connecting micro communities. It's a hot new word. Information ran an article on this. They actually called out Bill Tai's event as one of the big ones. A bunch of other founders are doing it too, but these are smart communities that are actually organizing. Think of the GameStop generation, how all these people organize to move the stock price. You're starting to see tech communities form micro pockets, and they're forming these communities not to one up each other, but to have real solidarity and high velocity information sharing. And they're going to connect. And by bringing them together, you have more power and a collective intelligence. This is new. And marketers are getting on board this. Product builders are getting on board this. M&A financiers are getting on board with this. Why? Because that's where the action is. It's where the data is. We're going to share data all morning. I'm going to host a panel this morning. The next 3 days, I got 3 panels. Really candid, smart people talking openly, sharing. So that stuff's got to get published. I mean, this is where it's going to get published on Instagram, on TikTok, on Substack, on Medium, on SiliconANGLE, CUBE Research. So being embedded in these communities is a really good, simple strategy.
So you're going to do kite surfing, right?
Kite surfing, yeah.
So Brian,
I'm going to try it.
So Brian's been kite surfing for many, many times, as you know. And I was talking to him the other day. He goes, Dave, I'm still a beginner. I'm like, you're kidding me. He goes kite surfing all the time. It seems very challenging. So good luck.
Well, they got pro kite surfers here. There's pro winners here. They're doing air shots. I'm going to be like, how do I work the kite? I talked to this guy, Jeff, last night. He was one of the big. He was the biggest wave rider on Mavericks until this year. He's one of the key people here, and he gave me a great lesson. He's like, have you water skied or wakeboard? Yeah, I do it all the time. He goes, well, the kite surfing is kind of the same thing. You got a harness, and you got to figure out how to how the kite can be the boat. I'm like, that's a really good analogy, and he's right, because in water skiing, the boat pulls you up. So the hard part of water skiing is getting up. With kite surfing,
it's easy.
The kite surfing, the kite's the boat. It's got to get. So you got to learn the kite first.
Well, are you good with wind? Are you good with do you sail?
I sailed as a kid. Yeah, I know how to sail.
You're gonna kill it. You're gonna get a good.
I'm 20 pounds overweight. I got to figure this out, right?
Well, you're gonna have to suck it up, bro.
The ROI on kite surfing.
You remember we went skiing that time in Utah, and I was like in good shape at the time, and you're a good skier, but we were banging them. I'm like, let's do more bumps, and you're like, come on, let's make turns. And we hit it hard. But
I want to hit the steep and deeps. No, I mean, it's like kite surfing has ROI to me because it's it's technical, it's fun. You're on the water, you got to be in shape. So you got to grind through like snowboarding. I watched my kids learn how to snowboard. I never snowboarded, but I skied. I watched them go through those first 8 hours of grinding. And like snowboarding, once you get the grind down, mechanics, it becomes super fun. I think kite surfing is one of those things where it's like mindset. You got to be there and say, okay, what is it? Is this, am I compatible with it? I'm definitely compatible with the concept of sailing and wakeboarding. So I'll try it. I'm expecting to be dragged all over the place. We'll see. But you know, like golf, right? You got to learn the technique. Well, Dave, have a great week, Memorial Day weekend. Salute to you. I'll do my
Yeah,
best.
USA, baby. You know.
They got jet skis in case I get swept out to sea.
Wait, what?
They have jet skis in case you get swept out to sea.
Oh yeah, that when I think I told you the only time I tried, I was down in Newport with my buddy who was a really good windsurfer. So I tried it for the first time. I could only go in one direction. So they had to bring the jet skis out to get me, to bring me back. Every time I tried to turn around, I'd fall. I'd be exhausted trying to get it up. And they'd say, "Yeah, go help that clown."
Well, I gotta go. I gotta go do my talk. Dave, have a great weekend. And Pod 102 in the book. Looking forward to watching your breaking.
All right, thanks, John. Have a good trip.
All right, see you later.
Bye.